tell people, welcome to New Realities. I'm back here today with a special broadcast with some very special people who are going to take us beyond this realm. And Jean Fox is my introduction to both John and Chip. So Jean, why don't you introduce these people here and tell us a little bit about them, and then we'll just dive into the extra-dimensional discussion.
Okay, well, I met John in 2007. He's a channeler and a civil engineer, a very grounded, intellectual, clear speaker and thinker. And so I've read his books, his channeling over the years, and then watched in our dimension, our space, our world, these things come to pass. And over the last year, of course, they've really been ramping up. And then I met Chip more recently. He is a geophysicist, and I met him at a CE5 event in Utah that he sponsored. And he has experiences that are similar to John's. You know, everybody has their own words to explain it, but I just thought it was important to bring to the table that these are, you know, even myself, I'm like, when I was first invited to the CE5 event, or even first was introduced to John, I was like, really? And it was like, well, it makes sense. You know, what they're saying makes sense. I can understand what they're saying.
And what's your interest in all this, Jean? Why are you so...
Truth. And I've had my own anomalous experiences. It's like synchronicities, I would say. And mine has been kind of a historical in nature. We're back to Francis Bacon is in my family tree. So it's like science and nature and just being a kind of evolutionary time period, or kind of a looping of where we've been and where we're going.
But we can all agree we're moving into some new territory, a new time. And I think that's why we're talking here today. So let's start with John. John, thanks so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here.
What's your last name, John? What?
Tettemer, Tettemer.
And you've been channeling for how long?
Oh, I don't know. I don't remember. Many decades.
Many decades. And who are you channeling? One person or a group?
Well, it started out when I had a relatively low frequency. I was channeling people that had just passed that had messages, and almost all of them said, you are now have an opportunity to set the record straight for the planet people, because you're all screwed up. These are people that passed that we knew well. Hume Cronin's one of them, an actor who you may or may not be aware of.
I know him. Yeah, I mean, I've heard of him. Yeah.
Who is John's father-in-law, by the way.
Oh, who was married to Jessica Tandy.
Yeah, right. That's correct. Right. Anyway, so that whole family. And what he said as soon as he had passed, he said, I want to write a book. And I said, well, I don't know how to do that. He said, well, come over here and join me and I'll give it to you. So he went down to the beach here in Newport Beach, and he started speaking to me, and the book came out very quickly. That was one of the early ones. There were a whole series of things like that. But what was common to those was that they were all relatively low frequencies. They're all of human beings that I knew, which gave me ready access to them. And then things started to change, and my frequencies started going up, and the call from beyond got higher and higher and higher, to the place where the last 10 or 15 years, it's thousands of miles off the planet at a place called a black hole. And these beings that I call higher energy are there, and they work through Mother Nature, and they work directly with souls. And And
what kind of messages are you getting from these beings?
Okay, the messages are relatively simple, so let me try to keep it simple. They're saying that the world that we knew on planet Earth that we established, meaning they established, is breaking down because the humankind can't deal with the mess it's made of the planet's life. We asked that the people on the planet take care of it, care for it, grow with it, and all of that. And it was all masculine based. That all failed, they say, and they've got lots of reasons for why that happened. But anyway, it all failed, and they want to take it all apart. And they're doing that a piece at a time. First of all, by reducing the population of the planet to a mere fraction of what it is today. They also want to have the whole new group of organizations established, which they call small communities, which are isolated. They do not communicate with one another. That's going back to essentially something that's very similar to maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years ago.
Right. I personally don't think we have to reduce the population if we can get it together to dismantle the old structures and turn humanity around. I think
okay,
it
but
can be saved.
you asked me what they were saying.
Right.
Okay, so what they were saying was, you guys have made a mess of it.
That's true.
You have no ability to make changes in it. You're not either able or willing to do the changes because it moves you out of the mind, ego-based life you're presently living and doesn't get you to the heart-based, soul-based life that we're insisting on coming in.
Right. Well, all right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you. So if you get any other messages you want to share, let me just go to Chip for a second, because Chip is also working with, what would you say, extraterrestrial beings. What kind of messages are you getting, Chip, from these beings that you're working with?
Well, it is complex. And one of the things that dovetails with what John just said is that the human race is a dying race at this moment, at this point in time. And that a number of these beings are here to help us, to progress us forward. And he has emphasized very specifically.
Who has emphasized that?
All right, so this being that we're in almost constant contact with, and particularly my son, who is in contact with him almost every night, is we've actually identified the name of the species from the old Russian dictionary and some new work that Elena Danan has done. The species is called the Amahalik, Strat 163. They currently live on Jupiter in a subterranean facility. And he is ninth dimensional. So his nickname is 9. He's also happens to be 9 feet tall. But he's extratemporal. He's a time traveler, all right, as well as being extra dimensional and obviously an extraterrestrial. So one of the things that comes across again and again and again is this time issue and the amount of time that we have as a civilization, as a species, to get our act together. Again, a lot, John is saying very much the same thing. So the emphasis very strongly is on spirituality, not on religiosity. And there's a giant difference.
Yes.
And that is a very sensitive subject that I have discussed with Steve Greer and other people as well, trying to understand how we unshackle ourselves from the standard religious dogmas that we have on the planet currently and become very simple, pure spiritual beings.
It's happening with
And particularly with our younger children. They're almost being born with this stuff turned on in their heads that allow them to understand it.
The gift of people channeling higher dimensional, higher spiritual beings, it's helping us see that spirituality is not a religion. It is a fact of existence.
Right. And, there's been some stuff written about it. One of the best books I like is one that Whitley Strieber wrote and then published about 10, 11 years ago called The Key. And there's a lot of and he had a visitation from an extraterrestrial, spent about 2 hours with him. And he says the same thing. So I like the idea, the stuff that you hear from experiencers and contactees is all pretty much settling on the same points. That being, as a race, as a civilization, we've got to look inwards to ourselves, not necessarily leverage Jesus Christ or Muhammad or the Buddhist prophets, but look inwards to ourselves, because they're all really fractals of the source. We're shavings off of a master consciousness, a unity consciousness, which all of these people in the multiverse, all of these species in the multiverse leverage for themselves. They understand they can communicate there. It is their life force energy. Oh, by the way, they can use the same energy, which we call vacuum energy or 0-point energy, for propulsion and a whole lot of other really neat things. It is the glue that holds the whole universe together. But underlying all of that, for us to ascend as a species, to become higher frequency, to become higher dimensional, we have to understand love and empathy. We have to understand that the spirituality is within each one of us, that it has, for whatever reason, been attenuated and subdued over the last 237,000 years. And it's now time for us to wake up.
Right. Is this the message you're getting to, John? Is there anything we can do from your perspective, John, to help ourselves?
Yes, we can help ourselves, but we're not going to do it in the same model.
What can we do, though? What can we
obviously continue to work with the idea of moving our systems from the head to the heart?
Okay.
And that sounds easy to do, but it's very hard for most people to do. The result is that most people during this time of transition will be lost. And this has happened before, apparently, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And what they're hoping is that enough people make the transition that we're talking about, so they'll be here to assist in building the new world, so to speak.
Right.
And in most cases, again, they won't. And what we can do is, best we can do, is to open ourselves up to living a heart-based, soul-based life, and spread that around as fully as we can in small communities. We've apparently, and those are all feminine-based. Another very strong message that comes through.
The divine feminine, yeah.
We have to get into a feminine-based world, because the masculine doesn't know what the hell is going on.
Well, let's talk to the feminine here, Jean.
I was just thinking the same thing. Well, so it's nature. The feminine is nature. It's being in harmony with nature and being centered and embracing and holding those that are close to you in love and care. Yeah, we're so our culture is so driven to achieve, and what John says is an inside job. You know, it's a solo job. It's your internal work. So everyone's looking outside of themselves, but then they're not taking the time themselves to be. And
the masculine system is based on external work. Mm-hmm. And this one is completely internal. And that's why they want small communities that are operated by grandmothers, not mothers, grandmothers, and raise children out of that system that are already transformed into a soul-based life. And
there's no hierarchy there of what you've said, John, that it's where each person is recognized for who they are. So my work in the world has been about self-discovery. For myself, has been about self-discovery, being the creator, artistry. I'm a makeup artist. And for the longest time, I'm like, I'm a makeup artist. Why do I get all the signs? It's like, oh, I'm a makeup artist. It's what we create. What are we creating in the world? And for me, it's all about revealing each individual's best self, helping them achieve what can we do to help each other become our best selves.
Right. So I have a couple of points to
yes, please.
To amplify what Jean has said, and from my own experiences and from what we get on some of our CE5 trips. Just this past week, there was a CE5 got finished up in Saguaro National Park in Arizona. And one of my very good friends attended. I was busy. I could not get to this one. And one of the big downloads that they got during this 6 week or six night field trip was that the extraterrestrials are very, very adamant about us ignoring and starting to forget all the material aspects of ufology, as in.
What do you mean by that material aspect?
The way we interpret it, I had a long discussion with her yesterday. The way we interpret it is that, guys, this is kind of theatrical, what you see in the skies. Jesus, there's 100 or if not more sightings every day on this planet. And that is all well and good. And it's exciting to see them. The physics they use and the crazy things they do with gravity are just phenomenal. But that is not the point for your civilization, for your species to ascend, to move forward. You've got to understand the consciousness aspect of everything. And John is saying the same thing. And Jean just said the same thing. She said it has to come from your heart. And so that was a very important point. And they keep saying over and over again, time is too short. You as a species are running out of time. And the Amahalic species that we interact with regularly is saying the same thing. He said unequivocally, we are a dying race.
Okay, so the answer is, or the question is, what can everyone watching right now do?
Yes.
What can we, to
proactively,
everyone?
what can we do? So, Jean is talking about stuff coming from a solo point, a heart chakra, like John says, so many words. And that is difficult because so many people on this planet rely on our standard fundamental religions to carry them forward, right? Mm-hmm. Catholic Church has got to have Christ. In Islam faith, you got to have Muhammad. And Buddhism say the very same things. These are all highly ascended avatars that are put on this planet to help guide us. But nonetheless, we have to do this ourselves. There is no way around it. And it's infuriating. And I've had this discussion with people like Strieber several times, and we don't have, in terms of disclosure, we don't have a good answer. How do we divorce ourselves from these fundamental religions and move forward?
I think John had
not really.
Go ahead, John.
What the higher energy has told me numerous times is that the religions of the world are an example of a failure. We've got a whole lot of religions, even today, shooting each other and killing each other with guns in the name of religion. It's going on around the world, and they say that those are incapable of being part of the solution in the future.
Let me interject for a second, because I do a lot of research on symbolism, and there is symbolism in our religions. Basically, what has happened is the religions have been distorted from their original true meanings.
Yes.
So we're confused. That's what's happening, is there's so much confusion because the essence of what was originally intended has been distorted.
My father, just on the way by here quickly, my father was an advisor to two popes of the Roman Catholic Church. And he got to a place there where he became very, very much aware of what was going on in the total hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church in Rome, where he lived for years. And he left, and the church didn't like it. And when he wrote a book about that, he was essentially saying that they don't have it right. They're not understanding what's really going on. They've got a masculine dominated system that they've built, and it's materialized into something that's no longer the religion it was when it started.
Right. There's nothing wrong with the words of Jesus. They're very direct, and correct. I don't think we need a religion around that pure spirituality. So a lot of people are moving to the what they're calling spiritual but not religious. There's a lot of people in that camp. And so that's part of the, go ahead, Chip, yes.
One additional enhancement there is that, the gospel, they've told us our being has told us that the Gospels and the Scriptures are right. They're essentially correct. Mankind has managed to mess it up, just like everybody's saying here in this little talk
So
around.
we know all this, and there's people that are moving away from organized religion in big droves, and that's probably who's on this program. But is there anything else you're getting from these beings that both of you are talking to besides that? I mean, what do we do to reach out and really make a difference? Is there anything we can do?
Well, you're doing it by helping people to bringing different perspectives, and you've done a lot of your own. Each of us have done a lot of it's incremental. It's it's knowledge, just and experience, and
there is a process there, right?
Yes, everything.
What is that process, Chip?
Well, it's a stepwise progression. I think in their experience in dealing with young species like ourselves, non-star-faring species, actually we are star-faring, but we'll leave that for another subject. But non-star-faring species that are very young are still learning, trying to understand themselves. They need some guidance, and is as simple and is as well structured as possible. And in dealing in this galaxy alone with 250,000 species over the last 5 billion years, they've learned that process is very important, because it can completely shatter.
My perspective is that this is not about human beings. We've been hijacked, and the grid matrix around this planet that feeds our thought form realities have been taken over by, some people call them the archons. So the archons have co-opted spirituality. And do you know about the archonic nature that came into the planet and sort of formulated religion, put us in fear, distorted our frequency, and separated us from who we really are. So there's these maybe interdimensional forces that are stopping us from knowing our true nature. That's one theory about that. Are you guys familiar with that? Anybody? No?
Well, I'm not familiar with that in particular, but we have all kinds of energies that influence our own thinking on a daily basis, whether it's extraterrestrial or whether it's our neighbor next door or our own, thought patterns.
Yeah.
So
or our pets.
Our pets.
Your cats
So
and dog.
it's like what John says, it's simplicity, and listen to your inner knowing. Go be in nature. Find your way.
And we're
only you know what your experience is and what you need to do for your own particular circumstances.
Right.
And we're all capable of that. Everybody can do that.
Go ahead, John.
It's helped by being in the small communities that they want us to see us start. The big communities have failed. The big cities have failed. Big government has failed. Most religion has failed. And they're saying, what do? We start out with all over again with what happened hundreds of years ago in small communities, where the kind of purity about being in a soulic world with ourself, not others. Because as soon as you go into the other part, you're back to the masculine thing again.
Well, I agree. I think that's what these last 2 years have been about. It's been about decentralization. It's about finding your community, and people are still finding that. So we are taking that. No, you're shaking your head. No, we're not.
We're really not. That there are millions and millions of people just in the United States, let alone the rest of the world, who are both incapable of listening to what we're talking about today and taking any action based on it at all. They're saying that mankind in this present mode is incapable of making the changes required. So
all right.
we have to take the people that can do it and put them in a small community and let it grow that way.
Okay. All right.
One,
Well,
one thing John said to me once that stuck with me was listen to the sound beyond sound.
I like that.
What is beyond our lone little bubble? You know, just open up to possibility. What can we? What is it? This be more open. What is beyond what I just hear? What's right here in my little space?
Yeah. So,
and I think I saw in one of John's essays on his website, he's talking about the mystic aspect of consciousness, where you have to be able to be subjective, where you have to be able to divorce the left side of your brain on occasion and recognize these anomalies, like you're talking about, Gene, in your life, these synchronicities that start to show up and these common threads. There is a framework for that consciousness in the entire multiverse. And all these beings are saying the same thing. That's where you need to learn to get to, at a higher frequency. That purity of spirit resonates. And if you start to think about it and you let them know that you want to proceed in that direction, they will start showing up at 4 o'clock in the morning in your lucid dreams. And that's for all the people. That's for all the people that are thinking, well, I've never seen a UFO. I've never interacted with an ET. Well, you do have to ask, and you do have to at least get to first base with this idea of the mystic portion of your personality.
Yeah.
John,
the
people that ask me about how do I get started, my advice has been, and it comes from them, not me, is to go into nature somewhere where you can sit quietly with the tree and start talking to it and listen to it. And if you do that, and you may not get a response immediately, but you give it questions, and I've done this myself by accident, all of a sudden you start finding out you're being talked to.
Yeah.
And the talking is limited to the experience of the tree, but it starts raising your vibration up. And that was the beginning of my vibrations are going up. So they're way, way, way off the planet today. And I can move immediately, like probably all of us can, to a vibration that is thousands and thousands of miles off the planet in the black hole.
Well, not light years.
Right. Light years. You can do it instantly, but it takes raising the vibration of your system systematically, and it's done from the heart and not the mind. So you can't say, how do I think this? You can't.
But you're saying there's go ahead, Chip. Go ahead. Yes.
So Alan is asking, he's posed this question: what can we do to be proactive about our spirituality, about ascending? And nobody likes to sit and listen to a YouTube video where everybody's just waving their arms and saying, oh, this happened to me and that happened to me. You know, it is time. And that was emphasized in this last CE5 I was relating to here just this past week. It said, you guys get off your butts and you have to be proactive. And so John has mentioned some things to do. I've said some things. Gina said some things. I'll tell you a little anecdote real briefly. I was doing a little landscaping up on my Montana Lake property, and I cut down a little seedling. And I felt terrible about it because I had this overwhelming feeling of sadness. Obviously, this little tree didn't want me to cut it down. And I'm going, how the hell does that? Well, this is this quantum entanglement thing that some of our physicists have been talking about for a number of years now. Believe me, no human being on this planet understands quantum physics. Nobody. Einstein, Bohr, Feynman, nobody understands it. And that can't be understood until we understand this mystic spirituality aspect of our persona. Then we will start to get there. So we have to at least accept going to this bizarre subjective world of mysticism, which the Eastern religion's been talking about for 5,000 years, to start down this path.
No, I agree with all of that. And that's why I've studied mysticism and spirituality, because I see that as the only way out is to develop the sense of what is consciousness really, who are we really, why have we come here, and how can we live best with each other and the planet. So I see that. So what is 9 saying? If you're in touch with this extra dimensional, extratemporal being every day, Chip and your son, what is he saying to you every day?
Can I just interject something right there?
Yeah,
We're talking
go
about,
ahead,
you're
Jean.
talking about
Yeah,
9. So
Yeah.
9 is the number of completion.
Right.
After 9, we go back to 1. So we're talking about raising our frequency, and our discoveries are incremental, and it's a rhythm. It's finding your own rhythm in life, finding a dance. I had one of my experiences was that all suffering comes from when we're out of rhythm with life and with our own self. It's just like noise. It's distorted. It's chaos. So when we can center and start on life is a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But so much of our experiences these days is it's like my nephew is in prison right now because of mental health issues, and he said it's like there's 1,000 songs playing at once and you can't hear anything, and that then he said he had an experience where there was just one song and everything came into focus and centered, and he felt peaceful. So we all need to find our place of peace. And my catchphrase lately has been, we're doing the best we can under the circumstances.
Well, according to John, we could do better, though. I mean, his beings, not John, and because we've reached a dead end, right, John?
We're not doing very well, actually. What we've done is we've built up a masculine-based system in this planet of competition amongst males and businesses, large businesses, big government, on and on and on, and none of that's working. And we continue to say, well, we can just fix it by doing something. And they're saying it can't happen. Please remember this if it's the only thing you ever remember I said. They say repeatedly, it's impossible for mankind in his present condition to make the changes required, and he's not willing to. Most people are unwilling to make the changes required to get back to who they are, which is in the soul-based world. And
so John, does that imply that they may be far more proactive in the next decades?
Who? The higher energies?
The ETs, yes. Are they going to force us to do it ourselves? We have to do something ourselves. There's metrics that we have to meet as a species.
As a species, we're going to be taken down to a minimal number of people. They say that this has happened before. And when they've done it in the past, several thousand years ago, I believe, they took everybody off the planet, and they're hoping not to have to do it again. So what they're asking us to do is to start these small communities, and they will continue to feed those small communities soul-based information.
That is happening. There are small communities coming together around the planet to share resources. So I see change is happening, and it may not be happening fast enough. I mean, what time frame do your beings give us, John? What's the time?
Momentarily, they say it's underway. And they say that within a year, for example, or maybe less, enormous confusion is going to take place, enormous loss of life, new diseases that mankind has no idea about at all, to help trim the population back. They say you've overpopulated the planet that we built here, we, the outer forces. We built on this little ball floating in space, and you're ruining it by overpopulating it.
So as we move into smaller groups and expand consciousness, expand our vibration,
yes,
that is possible for us to do for those who want to. And where will that get us then? What is the end game of that? Where are we supposed to be as a civilization?
There's no one place because it's constantly evolving. But it can be said that if the small communities, which are free of the masculine domination, will start to grow. And if they can be kept small, they will do well because they'll be heart-centered. What typically happens with these, apparently, they say, is that sooner or later they start to grow again. We go back to the old formula and end up being back where we are now, thousands of years from now.
You know, I'd like to emphasize something, Alan, just a little bit.
Yeah,
what John's
please.
saying.
No, please take your time.
Yeah, there was, you know, it makes a very good point about an egocentric civilization that we have. And if you look back over the last couple thousand years, Western civilization, Western culture has produced amazing results in terms of standards of living and medicine and science and technology in general. We have a right to puff out our chests to a certain point. But at the very same time, that arrogance and ego, particularly masculine, has completely ignored the teachings of Buddhism and Hinduism and all that stuff that they've been sitting on for a long period of time. And they are pacifists, right? They don't necessarily get actively involved in a lot of current activities. We talked about this last week, right? You know, the Dalai Lama is starting to talk about ETs finally. I'm going, well, that's fine. Get in the ball game, for Christ's sake. You know, Catholicism and Islam are at a point where there's some foundations that are quaking, if you will. I think the Pope recently said, you know, the church is 200 years behind time. John's grandfather, I guess, kind of understood that. They know they need to make some changes. Islam needs to have a whole new referendum, in my opinion, a whole new testament to get started. But nonetheless, that egocentric, there's some reason for it. Obviously, we have done better than anything else in the last 10,000 years since Jericho was founded, for crying out loud. And
it depends on how you're measuring success. If success is bigger cars, faster cars, more heaters in the house, and all that kind of crap,
materialism.
That's one way of looking at it, and that's the masculine problem.
Yeah.
Going back to a small feminine base place, most of those things don't count.
Well, I have to say, I don't think just the feminine minds. I think we need a good balance of left and right brain, masculine and feminine. If it's just feminine, which is great because we've been so out of balance, we need that now, but we need to come into balance that can talk to both sides of us. I think small communities are the way of the future. It seems like that is the most civilized, where you don't have homeless and you don't have people starving. Everyone's there taking care of each other. It's the most humane. I do agree, but maybe. So
let me,
go ahead, Chip.
Let me broach a little bit of a sensitive topic because it goes a little bit against what John is saying in terms of small communities.
That's okay. We can argue. We don't have to agree.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And that's what I want to show. It doesn't have to be any one way. Yes, John gets his information. You get your information. But we in the present moment have the power, I think, if people listen, to make it different, to take a different timeline. So yeah, go ahead, Chip.
So when we interact with the Amaholic species, 9 in particular, he is a younger elder. And in general, the Amaholic are viewed by a federation, all right out of Star Trek, as being some of the senior elders in this galaxy. Mm-hmm. And he works for this federation. He has older Amaholic that he reports to. Mm-hmm. For instance, whenever he discusses downloads and things he talks with Colin about or myself, he has to essentially clear it with his elder Amaholic. But he also has to clear it with his federation that is apparently headquartered on Jupiter. Mm-hmm. And what they say is that we will make it. One of these timelines, one of these precognition timelines that these extratemporal species are working with, we do make it, but as part of a federation that exists across this entire galaxy. So
yeah, I think we make it too. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so much effort being put out at this time by so many beings.
So many different beings.
But I think John's also suggesting a way we can make it. We
can, but let me put another point in.
Go ahead.
what they tell us is that we need to be pretty much a single government. To make
One
this
world.
work. One world government, all right? So that raises the hackles on everybody's neck. Doesn't matter whether you're American or Chinese or Russian or.
Well, that government has to be compassionate and not just looking out for its own.
That's
you know,
right. So
yeah.
it's a set of federated states that start off loosely federated, but have a unity government of some type. And I think the way that happens is when we get to the point where we can understand unconditional love, unconditional empathy amongst our own selves, we can forgive the freaking Taliban for what they do. We get to that point, then it becomes much easier to put together a one world government or anything you want to call it. But that is a requirement for us to be part of this giant federation of species, of which at this point there's at least 140.
Well, I agree with you. We can decentralize. We have the technology. Look, we can connect on Zoom. We can live in small communities and be interconnected with all the other small communities on the planet and achieve a unity like that that's decentralized. This is a vision. And John shaking his head no.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
duality is the problem.
Why no, John? I think that's idyllic for me. And
I know, but that's the, I've got to be careful my wording here.
it's okay.
I don't believe that we're here. We were put on this planet to be one of the bugs on the planet. There are lots of bugs on the planet. We're one of them. What
about the reason for incarnation as soul beings learning about experience of physicality?
I don't know what all that means.
It means we incarnate not to be a bug on the planet. We incarnate for experience. And it's, yes, some people have a weird self-absorbed experience that is destruction, and other people are here for compassion, love, and higher understanding. So we're not incarnating as bugs. We're incarnating, in my opinion, as in-soul beings on the trajectory of learning about our divine nature. You don't agree?
Therein lies the rub. It depends on how you define things. So our definitions are what separate us. Because who says a bug doesn't have a soul?
That's true.
A bug has a soul too. And some say, I have read where, we incarnate as all these different kinds of life forms on this planet. And we are one of the higher ones on the planet.
So what are you saying, John, about being a bug?
Well, they describe what we're here as an experiment by higher energy, that's from their standpoint, as an animal on the planet. We just happen to have an ego and some other features that nobody else has, no other bug or no other animal on the planet has. And the idea of having a one world or one universe, kumbaya, sort of everything's going to be great because we love each other, is so far away from where we are today. It's unimaginable.
Do your beings talk about the soul, though? Do they talk about?
Oh, absolutely.
Learning? So
it's all about the soul.
Well, we're becoming under an understanding of our soul and spirit. What were you going to say? Oh, God, John. Yeah.
There's nothing more important from the higher energy standpoint as we move into these smaller communities, that everybody find a way to get in touch with their soul. Their soul carries their assignment. And the question is, what's your assignment? And each person has its own assignment that's unique, that comes into the womb of their mother at birth. And so, or I guess impregnation.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah. That's good. I'm glad. But
no,
whatever.
We're in agreement. This is why. So we didn't come to mess it up. Some people got off on the wrong track, and it's unfortunate. That was their conditioning and brainwashing. And now I think we. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, John. What were you going to say?
I was going to say it also has to do with the fact that higher energy wanted the masculine in control of this experiment. They'll tell you that flat out. they say it failed, F-A-I-L-E-D, it failed. And so they want to take it apart and put it back together again with a more feminine-based model of what's going on.
Well, what did they think? How did they think it was going to succeed? And maybe that was their own failure. I mean, you can't blame it on us.
They didn't. They're not blaming it on anybody. They're just saying it failed. They said we started it. It was an experiment, and our experiment failed. They're taking full ownership of it.
I don't necessarily agree. I think
That's
we could
fine.
turn around. But Chip, what do you say in response to that?
Well, there are multiple, maybe hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of species and civilizations that have failed in this galaxy alone in the last 5 billion years.
Yeah.
I get that from downloads. I get that from bibliographies, reading what other contactees are writing. So I put all this together in a critical thinking exercise with inductive and deductive reasoning. And so I will be very transparent when I'm editing something I'm saying. I will tell you if it's coming out of my head and I think it's so, and I will differentiate that from stuff that I know to be true from multiple sources.
Mm-hmm.
So what we see happening is this emphasis on consciousness and spirituality. That's a given across all the contactees. They're saying the very same thing.
Yeah.
How we proceed and how we be proactive within ourselves, like Gene is talking about, is the real question. And for every person, it's a little bit different. But there also must be a common understanding, probably based on unity consciousness, of where we are going. We cannot be so scattered in our personal efforts that we don't composite a civilization of some type with some type of federation. We will never be allowed into any galactic federation from here on out. So number two,
is there some reason we should be in a federation?
Absolutely.
What reason? What reason?
We get that all the time from Nine when we're talking about it. That's a big point he makes, because he's spending so much time trying to bootstrap, and in Colin's case, helping him with his drug addictions and everything else, and trying to show him the totality of the universe. But he's also working with all the Almaholic are working with the entire human race to bootstrap them. So yes, they admit mistakes. I think I said this last week, Philip Kraft wrote a book over 20 years ago. And one of the main comments that came out of it is the ETs told him, in a direct, he was abducted, but he wasn't done any medical experiments. He was told that we're the third worst species in the entire galaxy for religious contention and religious wars and all that kind of stuff. So yes, the experiment has failed in many different shapes and form, but they also see, like Alan is saying, they also see a time thread that is successful. And Nine sees a time thread that is successful, at the same time making us aware that he will take us off planet if necessary.
So John, what were you getting at when you're saying we're not part of a federation? I think that's what you were hinting at.
No, I was asking the question.
Oh.
I'm hearing that we're trying to make ourselves into something that fits into or around the world. We can't even deal with ourselves yet. And so how do we get from the heart and the mind and the ego down into a soul-based place where we can live peacefully even by ourselves? We can't do that today, most of us.
And that is a critical question. Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody recognizes that. I can't at this point tell anybody that I have unconditional love and empathy for what goes on in this planet. When I see a Taliban soldier doing something to a woman or a child, I completely lose myself. Mm-hmm. And yet they're telling us we have to be able to get to that point. So right now, for me, it's bounded empathy and love, but they tell you that you must get to the point, and you will be able to get to the point where you see the person as a light being. You see their soul as a light being, and apparently that exists in all species. In other words, if you take away the arms and the legs and the head and the thorax and all that kind of stuff, what you see internally is that, that sacred soul light being. And that is common to all the species in the universe, in the multiverse. Excuse me. I'm going to quit using the word universe now because 9 told us it is a multiverse. Hot news flash for Leonard Susskind and Brian Greene and Avi Loeb. So the point being is that they do see us succeeding. And it must have, and maybe it has a start. John is inferring from the contact he has. It has a start where we kind of tear everything apart into little pieces. And maybe that process allows us to ascend in some fashion where we understand unity consciousness. Then we can become federated and come back together, because there are thousands of humanoid species within 400 light years of this planet. They are all over the place. We were seeded like all of them, particularly in the Lyran systems. We were seeded along with a whole bunch of others over the last several billion years, and we are a part of something much bigger than ourselves. But the secret, and John's asking that question, is, and Alan's asking that question, how do we proactively merge the need to understand our single souls with a greater unity consciousness? Well, I don't have an answer.
I think we have to be in joy, first of all. We have to realize this is a great place to be. Yes, there's a lot of problems here, but if we look at just the awfulness out there and forget the joy within us, we're not helping. We're here to assist the transformation by being the transformation. And yes, there's a lot of major issues that face all of us and the planet and civilization. But first we have to be it, we all have to do the inner, like Jean said, it starts within. Don't you think so, John?
Absolutely.
And that's what John says. But when I introduced John to my husband, and the first thing he said is, "What's your purpose?" If you could answer that question, what's your purpose? Most people who ask that question, they'll go, "I don't know." So
well, the people I know,
and that's scary.
John, go ahead. You were going to say something, John?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
No, wait, you were going to say something about, being in joy and being on purpose and being.
I don't understand the scope of what you talk about part of the time.
What do you mean? Which part don't you understand?
I can't even explain what I don't understand. But I do understand what the higher energies are talking to me about. And I've had years.
Well, tell us.
Well, I've been talking to you about it. And
no, I know you've been talking to about it, but you've only said, that will be taken off or people reduced, but you haven't told us any of the other maybe uplifting aspects of your messages.
The uplifting part would be to become a member of a small community that has a feminine base to it, not the masculine base that's failed. And it may fail also. They say that we don't know that for sure that anything we would recommend is necessarily going to be the right thing, but it's a better chance than what you've got going. And human nature is not willing to make dramatic changes yet. Said that just not do it. They would rather leave. Most of them would leave. And that's
what's worked for other civilizations throughout the cosmos that you have been in touch with. What has worked for them?
I don't know, and I don't frankly really mind.
Right. But something's worked because they're communicating about their success and what's possible. So something must have, and this is probably what you're saying to us now. This is what worked for them, right? I mean,
they're saying that as another experiment with human beings on the planet, which they say we have not cared for appropriately, they want us to get us back to square one in our relationship to the planet and relationship to ourselves. That's their objective.
I agree with that. I agree. We need to change the whole thing, how we're operating on all levels. And I think this is what 9 is here and telling us. And that's why Jean put us all together. So is there anything Nine wants us to know right now in downloads or from your son that is channeling through at this moment, Chip?
Well, we can emphasize a recent experience we had here on Halloween, actually, up in the lake property in Montana. Just to put an emphasis on quantum entanglement and nature and getting to a quiet state of mind that John and Jean are both talking about. We did a CE5 on a beach, on the lake, at a very prescribed location that he wanted us to go to. And he took it out of my head, the name of the bay and everything is called Butter Bay. We walk down there, we set up our chairs, we do our CE5, I turn on the crop circle tones, put the phone down in the lake and get a nice refraction across the lake, and all the animals start freaking out. The fish are lining up underwater, the crows are flying overhead, the squirrels are going nuts, there's fairies flying between us, and it just emphasized the part we are of this gigantic consciousness. So he was so extraordinarily happy sitting there, the sun's going down, the light's reflecting off the lake. He sits down next to Colin, holding his hand, and unspools the 5 feet long legs that he's got, puts his feet in the water. So he's still sitting next to Colin and his head's above us. And we're sitting in our gravity, he's 9 feet tall, right? And it was a completely different experience that Colin has ever had in terms of out-of-body experiences. He was almost partially materialized. And it is the only way that he could sense and feel the planet. And what he kept telling Colin is that I'm home. Many, many times, I'm home. And there was almost tears in his eyes. He was so emotional about it. So here he was, the only way that he connects with this, and it was a home world. They lived here. The Russians documented it, is for him to in consciousness, blend with us and sit with us in that environment. He got up with Colin and stood behind me and looked out across the lake, and it was an entirely different experience. So the whole point with all the fluff around it, at the core of this thing is an understanding that each soul is unique and that it can be isolated. And maybe that's what John is hearing and talking about small communities. But by God, it has to be down the road part of a much larger thing. We are not alone. We never were alone. And that consciousness is what we have to lever.
Okay, John, go ahead. Jump in.
I was just going to say, I think what you're saying and what I'm saying is the same sort of thing, but you're just looking farther down the road than I am.
Yes, I see you as getting first or second base. And then we got to get to home plate, and that's the next part.
So as you were talking, I started to get an image, and the image was the image was like a kindergarten room where the teachers, there's all this cacophony and all this noise, and the teacher, it's nap time. It's like time to quiet down. But, different individuals are poking their heads up and, creating a ruckus. It's like, calm down. We all need to calm down. Let's all be quiet.
It's obvious that the Earth, planet, human civilization is in a huge transition, a huge transformation. Something is happening. Something got ignited for whatever reason to the end of 2019. We've all been looking for the next step. Everyone wants to go back to normal. There was no normal. That was the old way. That was obviously not working. I agree with John. But we're in this transition, and I think there's things that are happening. It's with extraterrestrials coming, with the government release of information. Not that we need the government, but it kind of defines reality, sort of like what the church did in the time of Galileo. It's like, oh, you say we're not the center of the universe, and there's other planets, and that. And so we're fighting for our own sort of subjective reality. And we're changing. There is a change going on, and I see it as moving towards something positive, hopeful, and maybe everyone won't go along with it and want to go back to normal, which was not working. But I don't think the future has been defined yet. I think we're it's still up in the air. And I think that's why we're getting so much help through you guys and Jean's connections and all of us. So
if we're all part of the same thing. We're all part of the same thing.
I think each of us, I think that's what John's message is. What I get, we need to make a difference in our own lives and the lives of our community. Yeah, John.
Yes, exactly. And it's that simple. And they keep telling me this whole thing is very simple if you'll stop making it complex. And the reason we make it complex is we let the mind get into it. Because the mind thinks it has all the answers or wants to find out about everything. And when they say that they want us to know something, they'll tell us. We don't have to sit around and beg for it or spend all of our energy trying to make something happen. They will let us know.
Well, there's also millions, maybe 100 million people living in dense urban environments, you know.
They won't be under this program.
And how long do you think we have to get that together, John?
A year or two, maybe.
So we need to really get it together. Like,
well, there's no big deal to get together. It's just to go back to who we are.
Well, we have to decentralize. We have to get food. We have to get shelter. It's not like.
But it's starting to implant small communities that are diverse, that don't talk to each other. They don't want them talking to each other. Because as we pointed out here many times today, we're all different at the soul level. Mm-hmm. The soul of an Alaskan hunter is very different than one from Nebraska or somewhere down in South America. They're not the same human being. They don't look alike. They don't act alike. Their history isn't alike. But they can be part of a new community in their area to start this process again.
Yeah, we have to find our people, our tribe, and decentralize. I mean, what does 9 say about that, Chip?
Well, I'm going to interject some personal perspective into this.
Please.
And I've already done to a certain extent. I just want to reiterate my comments on the light being that exists within each one of us.
Yeah.
So an Alaskan guy can look different than a Nebraska guy, but shave away the arms and legs and everything, at his core is a sacred being. That's unique. Not all species in this galaxy have a soul. The malevolent ones do not. So we are by definition sacred beings, and we are programmed to ascend through reincarnation. That is a prescription that's given from the Creator. Mm-hmm. So we can start as a bug, or we can start as an Alaskan, fisheries worker, whatever. But we are designed and we are intended to ascend to these higher dimensions and higher frequencies. Mm-hmm. If we do not, we're going to be labeled as failed. And in that regard, we haven't. We have not been successful.
Well, is there failure, or do they just go back and kind of have another life and some existence where they can learn over again?
Everything that I hear from contactees that have been told how this thing works is that, you just go get recycled and you give it another try. And many people are in 5th and 6th, 7th iterations.
Each lifetime is a lesson, even maybe for bugs. I don't know, but I think we're more than that. I think we have this divine-like capacity. Don't your beings agree with that, John?
Yes.
And so.
And one thing John said in a thing that he produced recently, and a lot of us know this, but we tend to forget, or some people don't believe this, but is that when we pass, when we say that there's going to be a great reduction in our population, that's kind of a trigger for people that, oh, that's bad. But it's part of the natural process of death and rebirth. And it's a gift to move on to it's like climbing the next rung of the ladder. Mm. Our mind makes it bad.
But we still have to go to a planet and formulate a system. We incarnate into planetary civilizations. So how do people do it differently then, John, when they incarnate next time?
I don't know the words that you're speaking. if you die here, you have a choice. Apparently, many people do. My wife, when she passed, said, I'm not coming back. I'm not going to reincarnate. But there are a lot of other people that say, I will reincarnate. And we know some of them. And they become aware of it. But in terms of what's going on down the road, a long distance, I don't know. From my personal standpoint,
it's a mystery.
From my personal standpoint, it's enough for me to understand that if I get back in touch with my soul and its assignment, which is a unique assignment, we've talked about that a lot today, and live it fully, I will be at peace with my life on the planet as long as it's here.
Well, aren't you doing that, John? Because you seem to be doing it.
I am more than others, maybe, but most people aren't. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying you asked me what I'm doing.
Yeah. No, it feels like
I'm living what I'm talking, by and large.
So you're living in a small community.
Yes, in a way. It isn't. You wouldn't consider it's nothing like the small community they're talking about putting back on the planet. These are very small.
Right.
Another way of looking at that right now for individuals now is to, yes, make your life smaller and connect with people that are like-minded. So don't bring in that energies that are going to create conflict in your life.
And make life simple. We don't make life simple today. We've got the mind cooking everything that happens.
Go ahead, Ship.
I would
constantly comparing it to other things.
And I would emphasize what John just said. I don't know that small is synonymous with simple, but I do personally believe that it is. So being simple, this came to me in a lucid dream, one of those things, probably 9 dumped it on me. But, spirituality is so simple. It is by definition. And how we get to that point is the trick. To circle back around to Alan's original question, how can we be proactive to raise our frequency, to proceed with ascension? How do we better ourselves? One of the things that I did personally many years ago, I was always a musician. I was in a band with my brothers and our girlfriends, and that helped me more than anything else to blend both sides of my brain. As a scientist doing STEM stuff for 45 plus years, it was always the left side of my brain that was active. And I know John knows what I'm talking about. It is a manual effort sometimes to couple the right side of your brain. When that happens, some amazing things can happen. Now you can start understanding subjectivity and mysticism and some of these other things that seem to be the connectors to this unity consciousness. And that left brain thing is also responsible, like I said, for John is saying, is the absolute arrogance of Western culture. That left brain thinking, how can we make bigger cannonballs? How can we make bigger H-bombs, blow the shit out of ourselves? All of this has to be taken into account. So if we actually physically concentrate on merging the brain, and you can do this. Steve Greer teaches this with his CE5 breathing techniques, left nostril, right nostril, back forward, that blends the brain. It's called pranayama. Those cities, those capabilities exist and were taught to us. They're in the Vedic texts, they're in the Sanskrit texts. They were telling us this thousands of years ago. And that's where the failed thing comes in that they're telling John, we misinterpreted this badly down the road. Oh, by the way, they left the book of Enoch out of the New Testament. If you guys like Enoch, we're talking about this similar kind of stuff a long, long time ago. So we managed to mess it up, but it's a whole brain holistic effort.
I agree. That's why it's not male or female. We need the balance of both brains. But yes, we've been so out of balance with the masculine kind of domination and control and conquering the earth and destroying that we need to bring it back. But I think we need to come into balance. But John, I'm curious, how many people in a small community is ideal according to your downloads?
They say that can vary depending on the community and what its history has been in that area. It could be as few as 10 or 20, this 30 or 40, but they've got to get sufficient water supplies, sufficient farm capacity, sufficient animal life for animal food. And so it depends on the area.
I still think even in those small communities, we need to be connected through technology so we can, like, let's say one community needs something another community has, then we can just relay it.
They specifically don't want that to happen.
Well, that's their opinion, you know, I think.
But you asked me.
No, I get it. No, and thank you. But I think we've developed technology. Maybe it's in the way. Maybe it's.
Of course, it's in the way. That's the whole point.
So you're saying self-sufficient communities. This is what they're saying to you.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Like biomimicry, but nature feeding itself by what you have.
And your guys
I follow technology too, because it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And your guys, Chip, are saying something similar or different. What are they saying as far as small communities and technology?
One question I have for John is, and I got to ask it, do you sense any malevolence in these channelings that you do?
Say that again.
Yeah, what's your question?
Do you sense any malevolence in these channelings that you do?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. You said, is the word malevolent?
Malevolence, yes.
What are you asking him?
This is maybe a follow-up discussion, Alan, for another time, but.
No, just go ahead, just ask it. It's okay, we're all friends.
So one of the things we learned at Skinwalker Ranch when they're there with Gene and Colin is that is a major Cabal Black operations site, has been for years. And Nine laughs about it because there's a shield over the whole damn Uinta Basin in Utah, where it's centered around Roosevelt. And he couldn't find us for 3 days. He got kind of upset at both of us and said, you guys go on a trip somewhere, please let me know, meditate for Christ's sake, let me know where you're going. Because there's a shield over a massive subterranean civilization. There's 4 species living under the basin there and have been for millions of years. And maybe this is one of the original Amahalik homes. I don't know.
So what are you asking John then? What are you asking him?
The point is these Cabal Black operations have the ability to head fake contactees through psychotronic warfare. And if you want to ask Steve Greer about it, he's spent 30 years going through this with massive headaches when he's trying to give a presentation of psychotronic warfare. This is a whole cabal thing. I don't want to go into it at this point, but I just asked John to think back over some of his experiences, and if he sees anything peculiar, he needs to take note of it. I do not see this piecemeal process that John's talking about fitting in at this time. I hate to say it, but it's too much of a change. I do know what Nine infers and what other contactees talk about is this is a very regimented process. And we're going to go through step by step. What John's talking about is a huge change in an opposite direction. Maybe it's a better direction, but it is in a completely different direction. So I have not heard any of that kind of thing from Nine. Like I said, he's working completely dedicated to the Federation efforts of helping this planet try to get us out from the criminal activities of a number of malevolent species, along with a whole bunch of human beings that have been really malevolent. And if Colin can verify this, if you want to see a ninth dimensional being get really pissed off, talk about the Cabal. He gets really upset with the human beings in the Cabal. Forget the reptilians and all that other stuff. It's the people that he's most upset about and concerned about. But I see where what John is being told is a piece of this whole thing, but I don't think we need to go back 50,000 years.
Well, I first have to say, everyone thinks they're getting the highest beings that they can. You and your son and John and all these people. So I don't think we can question, I mean, unless people feel it's off, their source. I mean, everyone's getting something different, and we just have to allow and I take it all in. I hear all this, and I don't make it my truth until I confirm it with my reality. But, you know, I don't know where these things are coming from when you, Chip, are telling me something, or it's coming from through your consciousness, and it's always filtered. So I'm just open to possibilities. Right, Jean? Would you say that?
Let me give you a little a way of thinking about this. I look at nature like biomimicry. I pay attention to the patterns in nature. What is nature telling us? And I think this is what, John's saying, and we're saying, when you go see for yourself in nature what nature has to tell you. So you think of a wave. A wave comes in with a lot of force and it crashes against the rocks. It's very violent and it breaks up into pieces. And then what happens? It all comes back into the one. Change is hard. We separate and we divide, but we all go back into the one. So it's when John's talking about, our masculine mind, it's our thinking mind. Our thinking is what separates us from each other and causes all this division.
Yeah. So we don't like to be subjective almost by nature, right? Because you view it as drinking your own wine, right? Well, I made the dandelion wine and it's got to be the best thing in the planet. So I view this as a stepwise process. There's a prescription to it, and that prescription is based on experience and the failure of 100,000 species in the last couple billion years in this galaxy alone. So they know what's going on. So as a metaphor for progressing, John is saying, we've got to break up into little federated pieces. That's what I see. Because, Nine's telling us the same thing. That's what the Federation wants to do. We come together in some kind of a single government that can be presented to the Federation. And that has to happen here pretty soon. So you don't completely dismantle a civilization without energy and everything else, and without communication, most importantly, get to this point. But the metaphor is there. So disassemble what you have in a way, and it's now a small piece to step forward towards second base.
So another symbolic metaphor with our language is, it is what it is. It's a moment by moment proposition. The word is I and an S are both aligned. One has two, they both have two ends, but one is very direct and the other is flexible. So there's time to be forceful and direct, and then there's time to be flexible, and that's what we have to be. We have to adjust.
Well,
that's what we're doing.
I just have to say that I think we can include everyone's understanding of the future reality and just see where we resonate. I mean, I think we built civilization and we can keep the good parts. I think I agree we have to dismantle most of it because it is destroying the planet and it's robbing us of our connection to nature. But I don't think we have to be totally isolated from each other. But if this is what your beings are saying, John, that's their perspective. And we can't argue. That's your perspective through them. And I don't know. How did you get in contact with these beings to begin with, John? How did they come to you, the channeling?
I don't know that I remember exactly how that came about, but it was
John. Let me jog your memory, John. John just might be getting tired. John and his wife was ill, and they started traveling the planet looking for healing, different places, going to different places. And he was in Hawaii, and someone suggested, automatic writing, to just try it. And he thought, he didn't know he could do it. And then he discovered that it was just coming. Is that right, John?
Yes, and it started to grow, and I started writing books from people that are at a frequency that are very near the human level. And then those started rising up, and more complicated material came through. And I wasn't aware of sitting around trying to get my frequency up. I didn't take it to a car shop to get the oil changed or anything. Slowly, I ended up at a frequency that is way above human life here on Earth, and I go there regularly. How
do you know how high your frequency? How do you know the measurement? How do you know that where your frequency is?
I use a lot of sketches, and some of the sketches that they've given me show the elevation of these things and show the perspective that they're speaking from, looking down on the planet as a ball here floating in space.
And John, would it be okay to share your website so John shares this information freely? If you'd like,
free.
John.
It's free. Yeah, John, what is your website?
I don't know.
Will you share it, Gene?
SpiralArrowPublications.com.
Yes.
Spiral Arrow Publications, which, by the way, is the wand and a circular motion.
Spiral Arrow Publications. You can hear all the information that John has brought through. And Chip, you and your son. Oh, go ahead, John.
I was going to say I've forgotten, there's over 100 books that we've published through that operation.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're all available, and they're all a gift. So if anybody's interested in.
Thank you, John. Thanks for that, contribution and all of that. And Chip, you and your son, are you writing books? Tell us about the journey you're on with your son and this connection with the ninth dimensional being.
Well, it's a journal at this point, and you got a copy of it at one of the later versions of it. Keep that confidential for now, obviously. And there's some sensitivity for him around these issues, only because we had some rather bizarre things happen recently. And I'm not going to go into that. Gene's heard one or two of them. So, for Colin, he was involved in an opioid clinic in Mexico where he was given Ibogaine and met Nine for the first time. And Nine told him that Ibogaine and Iboga was put on this planet for us to experiment with in attempting to reach higher dimensions. Obviously, it's a class 1 drug and you get in trouble in the United States if you use it. But he did the clinic in Mexico and it worked quite well. I mean, the suppression on the opioid receptors was quite exceptional. And then a couple years later, I'm out at the CE5 in Borrego State Park in California, and all kinds of crazy things are happening in our CE5. And a mothership comes in, and I see a time-space rift open right in front of me. The entire crew walks through it, and Steve Gurr says, "Hold hands and ask for help," which I did. And I'm literally standing in the desert at 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm crying. I'm thinking, what the hell? That's all that went through my mind is help Colin. And he was in Houston. He did not know anything about what was going on. And 2 days later starts his 28-day trip of lucid dreaming where he was flowing all over the multiverse, not just this galaxy. And ever since then, Nine has intervened several times in suicide attempts and car wrecks and all kinds of crazy things. And then told him, well, I've been with you since you were born. And I've asked him to say something if he wants, and he will in the next few minutes. But that issue for us, I think, can be very common. They talk about spirit guides, etc., that people are born with, and they are here to help us, to guide us. This one is exceptional because Colin's kind of a 24/7 operation for him. So he comes from Jupiter every day to see what's going on, and he gets a little pissed, like I said, at Skinwalker, because we got under the shield there for the cities and he couldn't find us. And so that is a continuing relationship. I don't see that ever ending. It'll take Colin all the way through his grave and reincarnation, I'm sure. He tells us both that we're very important to the Amaholic. I do not understand why. He is very careful with the information he provides because of time paradox issues. Remember, he's extratemporal. So he's sitting there looking at all these threads within a multiverse. And I know this is really hard to absorb and to understand. We're just beginning to touch on it, but he is adamant about this. He says there is some thread that where we are successful as a species. But he also says at the same time, there's a thread that looks like in 200 years, there's no human life left in this planet, that we managed to really totally screw it up. So again, the information he provides is very careful. He gets it sequestered and edited by his senior elders as well as the Federation. And then he relates it to us usually as an out-of-body experience with Colin. And with me, I have not been taken out of body yet. Colin tells me that's coming down the road. He keeps asking Nine to take me out of body, and it's not time yet. And that's a time paradox issue. Some of the things I'm doing right now and discussing this, on a universal platform like YouTube, we have to be careful with, and he knows that. So these time paradox issues are very important.
So is there a message you want to bring through now to people listening? Because we should wrap up soon, but
yeah, we're getting to an hour and a half here.
Right.
No, I think the message is like a lot of the other species that are helping us, a lot of the higher frequency entities that John is talking about. Same thing with Gene, with the synchronicities and the strange things that are happening, is we are watched by multiple species 24/7, and they truly want to see us succeed. But there are benchmarks for us. We have to meet certain benchmarks and metrics before we can go forward. There is a cabal issue involved in all of this, and we'll leave the malevolent species out of it for now because that's a sensitive subject with a lot of folks. But yes, there is a 95% chance they're looking at this from a precognitive sense, from the future, extratemporal sense. They see that we do succeed. Well, boy, it's going to be scratching, bloody murder for us to be able to do this. Apparently, in the future, we are seen in this galaxy as the go-to species to ask about how to get through a shit show when we're evolving. Down the road, we're known for that. Yes.
Yeah, John laid out one scenario. It doesn't have to be the only one to make us help us succeed. There's many possibilities as we raise our frequency. I think that's one of the things you brought in, John. Any words you want to leave us with before we sign off?
No, other than to realize that we're not in charge of what's going on, and that we were given a mind and a soul, and we have forgotten the soul. Most of us don't know anything about the soul. Most of us didn't raise our children to know anything about the soul or its assignment. The objective here is personal well-being, personal health, personal peace, and love.
So we do have a chance, if we remember the soul, to make peace.
All of that's true, but they're saying we've got to get the planet rearranged so that these individuals can operate on the planet from a soul-based place, because right now they can't.
Right. Well, some people are making an effort to make that happen.
No, I understand, but you asked me to make a comment.
Yeah, no, thank you. So it's Spiral Arrow Publications is your website for all the books that have come through you, right?
Yes.
Well,
absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. And if you have any new information, you're always welcome to come back on and add to.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Yeah, but let me just ask Chip. Chip, anything you want to just leave us with, and your son? Is there anything like right now coming through, Colin?
No, nothing that's different from what I summarized previously. I think I can't emphasize this enough. I think I said this at the start of the discussion. There is a time fuse on this. I think John's saying the same thing. They can't emphasize that enough. And for us to stay away from the materialism, Seeing UFOs in the sky is theatrical. What we really need to do is look into ourselves and try to understand unity consciousness and how our soul can ascend. That spirituality is the number one thing. And how you work within the confines of the basic religions is a difficult thing moving forward. I see that as the main impediment for our species to ascend. I do not know how to proceed with that. And by the way, a lot of ufologists and experiencers and contactees will tell you the same thing. So that's that dead stop in there somewhere. And how do we get through this thing?
Well, I make some contributions in my book here. And
yes.
have you seen my book?
I have read Carolyn Cory's stuff was great. She was talking, I think, about autistic children or spectrum children, or one of those authors was anyway. And they're being born with extra DNA. They're being born with things turned on in their brains. And God bless them. They're going to take us forward.
Right. And Jean, thanks so much for anything you want to add, because, you know, you're really...
I'm a musician too. And I just would say, you know, love without action is just a word. So there's a lot of suffering in the world. Find somebody in your world, in your sphere of influence that you can help, even if it's in small ways. So that's where we can act.
And how does the future look like for you? What do you see as us moving forward?
Well, I agree with both John and Chipper. I wouldn't have brought them here, but you know, we just need to find our own place of peace, like they said, and do what we can for each other. And what will be, will be. We'll just do the best we can.
Well,
none of us know how long we're going to be here.
Right. I do think we have a chance of making it as a civilization. We do have to change. And I think change is coming. It's here. It's slow. And we do need some drastic moves, like John and Chip are saying. And I think there's hope. I think there's a timeline that we have yet to proceed. Right, Jean?
Yeah, there's always hope. I mean, look at the ages that we know about in our own history. Where it's just a new deal.
Yeah.
What that's going to look like will make itself evident as time goes by.
But I don't think we have to throw out the technology that can also connect us. This is my
We'll
feeling.
We'll see.
John doesn't agree. Chip may agree. Are you channeling there, John? Okay.
No, I'm just observing that we're going around in circles on the business of wanting to maintain the masculine development, which we sort of worship.
I don't think we're saying we want to maintain the masculine. I mean, I'm not. Are you? I think so.
Well, it's about control. It's about.
How do we bring in the feminine then, John? How will you? I mean, yes, put women in charge, but how do you see bringing in that feminine side?
Starting new communities with feminine leadership.
Okay. I'm
recognizing that they're both there, but they have different jobs to do. Men and women are not the same animals.
Right.
And let that be at peace. I'm not trying to make anything into an international or worldwide or global anything. It's just dealing with what I would call the facts as I see them and as I'm given them.
Right. And how do you feel as a woman, Jean, about that? I think.
Well, when I hear that, I think of the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And I think we can learn a lot from indigenous cultures. I spent time with the Aborigines.
Tribes.
Aborigines lived in small societies and they existed and continuously for 60,000 years until the white men came through. But all right. Thank you all for being here. And see you soon. Thanks, everybody.